Coming up next here on the Metal Command podcast, Heathen has a brand new live album called Bleed the World Live. Empires of Eden, Guardians of Time, an album that I did guest vocals on, is getting a proper release in Japan with a bonus track. Kiss has announced a 50th anniversary show for the Kiss Army, which will be happening this fall. And I talk about Helloween's Gambling with the Devil. I revisit that album as part of the celebration of the 40th anniversary of Helloween and the upcoming tour. All of that next here on the Metal Command podcast.
You are listening to the Metal Command podcast.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you. Really excited, of course, to be here with everybody today. And I have a lot of really fun stuff to talk about. But as usual, if you do want to support the show, by all means, hit the subscribe button. Hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post any kind of content. And if you follow this show on any other form of social media or streaming service, give the show a like and a follow there. Have a lot going on in the metal world today, man. Really excited to be here. Kiss has announced a reunion show for the 50th anniversary of the Kiss Army. I'm going to talk a bit about that show. Also going to talk a little bit about Gene Simmons and his whole package to be his roadie, when he does his solo tour. And I'm going to talk about that band in general because I think they have a pretty, a great legacy. And I've never really touched upon them that much on this program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Empires of Eden, Guardians of Time is going to get reissued in Japan. And there is a really cool bonus track called Interstellar Sin. This album came out back in the fall. But I sang one song on it called Stand United, which I'm pretty proud of it, to be honest. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, plus recap the interview I did with guitar player Stu Marshall. Helloween has a 40th anniversary celebration and tour, obviously going on starting later this year. And as part of that celebration, and being the fact that I have followed this band probably closer than any other band I have ever followed in my life, I'm going to talk about each one of their albums over the course of this year. And of course, they have a new album that's being mixed right now as well. So I'm going to start the show off, though, with Heathen. New album, live album, Bleed the World Live, just came out this a couple weeks ago now. And really, really excited for this. I think this live record is absolutely amazing. For those of you that do follow the show, or if you don't follow the show, there is an interview with Cragen Lum, who is one of the guitar players in Heathen, and right now pretty much the main songwriter. And so they put this live record out, which I think is very good. I'm going to show it to you. I have it right here. Here it is on vinyl, transparent vinyl. Directly from the Heathen store, you could see Cragen's autograph right there. It's a red transparent vinyl. There's 9 songs on the album, actually. Really, really awesome record. They did a great job on this. And so let's review it. Let's talk about it, because that's what I really want to start the show off with. Now, for those of you that like thrash metal and like this band, they're going to have some new music hopefully out by the end of the year, at least maybe a lyric video for the upcoming album. And you can get more details on that with the interview that I did with Cragen Lum. So let's talk about live records in general. When I evaluate a live album, I don't put live albums in my favorite album of the year list, basically because most of it's really not new material, right? But when I look at live albums, I look at 3 major things when I evaluate them. 1, I think about the performance of the band on the actual album and how the album actually sounds. 2, when going into how the album actually sounds, how good is the mix on the live record? And last but not least, song selection, which is a really big one for me, actually, when it comes to live records. So let's start first with talking about how this record sounds. First of all, I got to give Craig and Lum and company a lot of credit. They did a tremendous job on this record, not only with the performance of the band, but the sound of the album itself. And the mix, I think, is awesome. Now, one of the things they did, and one of the things I wish more bands would do, because it's a lot cheaper to do this than, say, it would have been 30, 40 years ago. Heathen went on tour. They opened for Symphony X, and I think they had an opening tour for Overkill, with Overkill. They went out and recorded all of their performances from, their past tour. I don't remember which tour he said it was, but I know they recorded pretty much all of the performances from it. And what they did is they went through all of those tracks and picked the best performances and put them on the actual record itself. So in other words, they went through all of the songs and all of the tracks, listened to the performance of the band, and picked the best performance from each city. They also recorded the crowd. Now, I think that's a really cool thing. Like bands, like I know Blind Guardian has done that, in the past. Iron Maiden's been doing it for, over 30 years. I mean, if you go back to the last live album Maiden put out, or the Book of Souls album, live album that came out after the Book of Souls album. I think Flight 666 did this, where they took live songs from each, the best performances from that tour and made a live record out of it. And if you want to go further back, Iron Maiden also did this with A Real Live One and A Real Dead One live albums that came out in 1993. They went and found the best performances from the Fear of the Dark tour, kind of divided it up by, old stuff and new stuff, and they picked the best performances and put them on those records. So Heathen has essentially done the same thing. And as a result of that, they ended up getting the best performances from the band. I think a majority of the songs, I think there's like 4 songs from the show they did in Houston. But that's what they did. And then they mixed the album. And if you want a more detailed explanation, well, let's let Craig and Lum tell you that, because we talked in depth about it in the interview that we did not long ago. So to refresh your memory, here's Craig and Lum from Heathen talking about how they made the live record.
We recorded every single show on our tour that we did with Overkill in 2023. Mm-hmm. And we recorded both the band and the audience. And then we scoured through all of the shows to find the best performance of each song or something special for each song. And we worked on kind of compiling it, pulling it all together from all the different shows, and got everything set up, and Zeus mixed it, and it sounds incredible. It sounds amazing. And we're super stoked because, I don't know, I grew up listening to live albums, and part of the experience of listening to the live album is the audience reaction and the audience participation and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I've listened to some recent live albums, and there's no audience, they didn't record it, or whatever, and it's kind of it just loses something. There's those classic live albums Speak of the Devil and Tribute and Live After Death, and I mean those have. There's a feeling that you get when you listen to it, and so we wanted to try and capture that in a more modern, live record.
By tribute, I'm assuming you're talking about the Randy Rhoads Ozzy Osbourne live album. Okay, I just want to make sure that was my first release by Ozzy, and that album, it ended up getting me hooked onto him. But yeah, I remember. It's funny you mentioned that record because I remember the audience reaction. I remember. A lot of that live album really getting me into that. And in fact, I probably wouldn't like live records if it weren't for that. So it's a pretty, and I think part of it was recorded in Cleveland. I could be wrong though.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the rumor. Nobody really knows, but yeah. So it's cool, and I think you picked a great single, "Sun in My Hand." I think that's probably one of my favorite songs off of Empire of the Blind. I think Empire of the Blind went down some avenues that Heathen never had before, and I think that's one of those tracks that
Yeah.
really, honestly, is probably one of my top two or three on the album.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, what's interesting is it's not the most streamed song or whatever, like play wise,
Yeah.
but when we play live, the crowd is really into it and participates, as you can hear in the
Mhm.
live video and watching the
Right.
video, and it's great like energy exchange between the band and audience. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So we wanted to kind of lead off with that,
Sure.
and you know, we've got another song that'll sort of be featured and another music video, another live video
Right.
to go with another song from the record. So
Right.
it came out great. We've got at least one song from every album. Um, we were able to find an extra song that wasn't on our usual Overkill tour,
Hmm.
um, tour set list. We had a couple of off date shows that we did in the U.S. with
Right.
Exhorder. So we pulled "Set Me Free" in from one of those shows, and
Sure.
it came out really good, man.
Yeah, you played Goblin's Blade, which is actually one of my favorite tracks off of that album.
That's
Classic song,
that
definitely.
seems to be the fan favorite from
Yeah,
that first record.
absolutely. It's my favorite from that album, honestly. So I was when I looked at the track list, I was pretty excited for that. So, yeah.
Cool.
So you have this available. It's for pre-order. It does ship, according to the website, March 14th. But
Yep,
you have it
that's
on
cool.
red. You have it on red vinyl. You have a really cool slit mat that you have available for it. CD, a couple cool T-shirts, and if you want to save a little money and want everything there, you can buy the whole. You can have it all bundle type thing going on. So,
Yeah,
uh,
the You Can
yeah,
Have It All bundle is only available in the Heathen store.
correct.
So yeah, and the vinyl is it's a transparent red. You can't really tell from the way it's presented, but
Right.
it's going to look really cool. I'm stoked on it.
When you're recording a live record like that, and I know a lot of bands might, will record live albums from like around. I mean, how painstaking is it to go through all of those shows and then be like, hey, pick out what's the best performance. Like, for example, let's say you play 50 shows. You got 50
Yeah.
concerts to go through. Do you do it like, do you go through 50 versions of the song and pick out the best of that 50? Do you go through each show individually? Like, how did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to go through, and there are going to be some things where like there's a technical glitch, or like,
Hmm.
somebody's wireless cut out, or I mean, there's any number of like problems that can happen during a live show.
Yeah.
So not all of them are going to be usable. You find the ones where everything is usable, and then basically just kind of scour through it and see, okay, where was the magic? So for
Yeah.
example, like we had there's one show where I think there are like four songs from it, I think, from the Houston show, where we were just on fire like that
Yeah.
particular night for whatever reason. And the audience was also on fire. It's one thing if we're playing and the audience isn't there with us, or vice versa.
Right.
Sometimes there was a great audience, but like something happened, somebody dropped a pick or a stick, or the mic cut out, anything.
Hmm.
So it's basically that was what really kind of took us a long time, was kind of filtering out all of the stuff and finding the best ones, and then going in and basically like when the show's recorded, it's the whole thing, so you have to go in and you have to cut it up and find just the song and get all those files, and so
Right.
there's a lot of work kind of piecing it all together.
And that's Craig and Lum talking about the album Bleed the World live and how it was made. Now, let's get to the third criteria, because we talked about the first two. Song selection. Now, when I think about the song selection on this album, I want everybody to be clear. They were on a tour where they were the opening band. So they weren't headlining. They couldn't play like 15, 20 songs. I mean, they essentially played 8 or 9 songs here. Again, looking at this live record right here, really, really good stuff here. But essentially, they had 8 full-length songs on this album. So you have The Blight, Empire of the Blind. Again, they're basically promoting the Empire of the Blind album. That's their latest release. So you're going to have those first 2 songs. And The Blight is one of the best songs Heathen's ever recorded, number 1. But those first 2 songs are there. And then you go down here to the song, what is it? Dying Season. That's off of The Evolution of Chaos. Set Me Free is a Sweet cover that was on the first album, Breaking the Silence. Sun in My Hand, which is another song off of Empire of the Blind. And, you ended up getting Goblin's Blade, probably a fan favorite off of the Breaking the Silence album. And then, of course, there's the song Hypnotized off of the album Victims of Deception. Now, Heathen doesn't have a lot of albums, right? But they did cover pretty much their entire discography. And to be honest with you, when it comes to song selection, I think they did a tremendous job on that. I really do. Most of these tracks that are on this live record, there's a lot of other songs I would have loved to have heard, but given the time constraints of being an opening band, I understand why they wouldn't be on there. But I think that the song selection is fantastic, and actually the live album itself flows really, really well. So this being the set that they played on tour, not only did they pick probably the best group of songs to play as an opener, but they covered the entire Heathen discography. So song selection, I mean, I'd give them an A+ on that. So again, I think this is a really well done live record. I think that the packaging and everything that they did for this, as far as the merchandise goes, because there's a slip mat with that album cover on it. You got this really cool t-shirt. I have another t-shirt with just the Heathen logo that was part of their merchandise package. You have the CD, which is right here. And they sent you some stickers as well. But really well done. The merchandise for this was on point. The shirt is very high quality. It was also done by a guest that many of you have seen on the show, Justin Roth from Warcurse, who owns a screen printing company. But overall, tremendous job when it comes to the merchandising of this live record, the sound in the mix, and in my opinion, I think the song selection is excellent given the time constraints that they had. This live album is a 10 out of 10 for me. So if you like Heathen and you have followed the band, this live record to me is essential. And last but not least, as I talked about in a previous podcast, that they're working on a lot of new music. I think Craig in an interview said they have almost 3 albums worth of new material written. And I believe there's quite a bit of the next album already done, at least at the time we did the interview. Now, I don't know how far they are now, but I'm really excited for what's to come with this band, because I don't think Heathen is a thrash metal band that has truly reached its potential. But we're going to find out, because, as Craig said in the interview we did, he doesn't want long delays between albums anymore. So I'm really excited and looking forward to what's to come with this band. But with that said, the live album is excellent. Craig and Company, if you're watching this, props to you guys. All of you did a fantastic job, from the band to the people to the mix of the album, to recording it and picking the best performances and the song selection. Definitely, if you like live records and you like this band, it's an essential buy. So there you go. Props to you guys. Great job. Now let's move on to a different subject. Kiss has announced that they are playing a reunion show. I believe it's in November. and they're doing it for a 50th anniversary of the Kiss Army. Now, obviously, aside from the Gene Simmons, you can pay Gene Simmons $12,400 to be his roadie for a day that he had put up there for his upcoming tour, which, he canceled a bunch of dates for. People are, of course, bashing Kiss. Either they are praising them or bashing them for the fact that, hey, they did a farewell tour and that, why are they playing a show again, et cetera, et cetera. So let me dive into that a little bit. Folks, first of all, I am not the biggest Kiss fan. I do like them, and I do like quite a bit of their music, but I'm not like this diehard Kiss collector like I am with, say, Iron Maiden or even Helloween for that matter. But I respect them. And even though I don't love Kiss, most of my favorite bands do, and probably wouldn't exist if Kiss did not exist. But I've always had respect for this band. I mean, it's like a love-hate relationship. People either love them or hate them. Gene Simmons either has a bunch of fans or people that highly dislike him. And you can't take away the fact that they have made a huge mark on the hard rock and heavy metal scene. And I think them going and playing one show to commemorate a 50th anniversary of the Kiss Army is really not that big of a deal as far as, because they basically said they aren't touring. It's kind of like the whole Slayer situation, right? They're never going to do a full tour again. Slayer came back, played some one-off shows and festivals. But did they go on a big tour or make another record? Absolutely not. And that probably won't happen. And I think the same thing is going to happen with Kiss. Now, never say never. But, number one, it's a celebration of bringing, I think Bruce Kulick, a guitar player that played in the band, is coming there to play, some songs with these guys, kind of reunite with them as well, which I think is cool. And they're not even putting the makeup on. They're just going there to play some music and celebrate the 50th anniversary of a band that really made their mark on the hard rock and metal scene. Kiss has a diehard fan base. I mean, if there's a band that has marketed themselves, in a way that really just, is unheard of, maybe aside from Iron Maiden with the Eddie mascot, Kiss is just the merchandising Kiss has done over the years. I mean, you have to respect, even if you dislike them, respect what they have been able to do. So I think it's cool. I mean, I like a lot of their music, both from the makeup years in the 70s, and all the way through the 80s. I even like the albums without makeup. In fact, the album Revenge, which obviously Bruce Kulick played on, was my first ever Kiss album. I had that and Kiss Alive 3 back in the early 90s. And I remember that Revenge album. I think of all of the non-makeup albums, that is my favorite one. I had great songs, Take It Off, you had Domino, you had God Gave Rock and Roll to You. You had lots of great tracks on that record. And I still have that as probably one of my top 5 albums by them. Now, I like Destroyer, Dress to Kill. I mean, they had a lot of great records. But I don't really understand why people are all freaking out about this. Now, granted, the more that people complain about it and talk about the band, the more publicity it gets. And, of course, if you're Gene Simmons, you want that publicity. You want your name out there. It's kind of like when he put up that whole thing about you can pay Gene to work for him for a day, the whole $12,400. One of the things I've always loved about Kiss is the way that they have always gone into media and generated publicity for themselves. I'll give you an example. So the whole roadie thing for the Gene Simmons solo tour where you can pay him to work for him, it's a genius thing to do. Because it's really not about the money to be his roadie. Now, granted, if he sells one of those packages, great. He just made $12,000, right? And that person gets to hang out with Gene, have dinner, get introduced on stage. If you're a lot of these Kiss fans, there's people that would pay the money. I wouldn't be shocked if that dude would not have sold all of those out for that tour. But it's really not about that, right? What it's really about is generating publicity, getting yourself in the algorithms on social media, and getting your name up there in the algorithm so everybody sees it. That's what that's about. You know, when he announced that, so many people were complaining about it or fighting over it. The more you mention the band, the more it gets into the algorithms on Facebook and Instagram and X and everywhere else, the more publicity it generates. I remember this interview. I don't remember what magazine it was in, but I remember Gene Simmons talking about the Kiss caskets. For those of you that remember those, the coffins, which when those came out, I remember you had a lot of talk about those things. I mean, I think they were pretty expensive too, if I remember correctly. But you know, my memory serves, they weren't cheap if you wanted one of those things. But here's the thing I remember reading, and it made so much sense to me. Gene said, if he talks about Kiss making an album, you might have 100 articles about the fact that the band's making an article. But if you talk about a coffin, even if he does not sell one of them, he didn't care, because talking about the Kiss caskets would generate 700 articles. And there was another, I'd like to say another article where he talked about the fact that there is no such thing as bad publicity as long as people are talking about you. Because if nobody's talking about you, you are irrelevant. And he's completely right, especially with the way social media works today. So I think it's really cool that they are going to celebrate a 50th anniversary. If you're looking, I'll tell you what, if you're looking for one of the most diehard fan bases of any band in existence that has done probably the best job of merchandising themselves, it's Kiss. And the first time I ever experienced that, I saw them on their reunion tour in the 90s when they put the makeup back on. They came here to Gund Arena, which is now Quicken Loans Arena here in Cleveland. And it was one of the first concerts I ever went to. I didn't even know a lot of their songs, but man, we had like nosebleed seats because I think we were like seniors in high school when that whole tour took place, or we had just graduated. And even sitting up in the nosebleeds, that show was absolutely phenomenal. But I remember going there and walking through the arena to go to our seats, and the amount of people dressed like Kiss with the makeup and everything, I've never seen anything like it. Now, I've seen bands have people that follow them that do stuff like that, but I've never seen anything like that at any other show than what I saw at a Kiss concert. So I think that the 50th anniversary celebration is great. I'm glad that they are getting back together to play another show, play some music together. I'm glad they invited Bruce Kulick, which I believe they did. I think that's cool. I think he did a great job as their guitar player. And honestly, the other thing is, a lot of the non-makeup albums where they didn't have makeup on, I think a lot of those were highly underrated. I think Asylum, for example, Lick It Up, those are two great records. They really are. So, and Revenge, another phenomenal record. So, those are my thoughts on that anniversary reunion coming up in November. I think it's like November 14th. I think it's like for a weekend or a week. You know, I don't know the exact details, but it's all over the news. But big mad props to Kiss. Much respect. And I think it's cool that they are getting together, even if they don't have the makeup on, to jam out some tunes. With that being said, I'm going to go into the break. Coming up after this, I'm going to talk about Helloween and the album Gambling with the Devil. And I'm going to talk about Empires of Eden, Guardians of Time, an album that I sang some guest vocals on, getting a proper release in Japan. All of that coming up next here on the Metal Command Podcast. Hey everybody, it's Tony here from the Metal Command Podcast. I appreciate you watching this program, and if you want to see more of what I offer on this show, please by all means hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, follow me on any other social media outlet that you see this program, and again, I appreciate all of your support. Greetings and welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Now let's talk about Helloween. Helloween is celebrating their 40th anniversary this year, and they have a tour starting in the fall. They are putting the finishing touches on the new album as well. And for those of you that may be new to the show, there is an interview with myself and Andy Darris from back in December, talking about the tour, talking about the 40th anniversary, and of course, talking about what the new album might sound like. For those of you that know me, and know of me and know my background. Many of you have also followed me on my radio show for a number of years when I had it. And many of you have also followed me from the very beginning. And for those of you that don't know, there is no band out there in the metal scene that I have followed more closely than Helloween, or that I have covered more than Helloween. They are my favorite band of all time. Really great group of guys. I've known them for a number of years now. Probably close to 30 years, 27 years to be exact. And I thought to myself, what can I do on this show to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the band? So what I decided to do is I am going to talk about each one of their records, give you guys some perspective on those specific albums, and even play you some interview clips from the archives, because again, there is no band that has been a guest on the show more than Helloween has over the last 27 years. So I'm going to talk about each one of their albums. I'm not going to really go in order, but I am going to talk about each album at some point throughout the entire year. So the first album I am going to talk about is the album Gambling with the Devil. And I have a lot of reasons as to why I'm picking this album first. Gambling with the Devil was a record that really helped move the needle for the band with the current lineup minus Michael Kiske and Kai Hansen, because obviously that happened before this. But one of the significant things about this record and about the tour is, one, the album was phenomenal. Number two, the management and the band did a phenomenal job as far as marketing this album and the tour. And this record and the tour that happened, the Hellish Rock Tour, where Gamma Ray was the opener. In the United States, where this band, most power metal bands in general, have struggled to gain a fan base, this album and the way it was promoted moved the needle quite a bit for these guys. It really helped move the needle quite a bit from where it was previously. So I'm going to talk about all of that. And I'm also going to go back to some interview clips with Andy Darris and bass player Marcus Grauskopf as well. So the album itself came out late 2007. It's really, really cool with the way they did the marketing they did for this record. So it was released with different versions throughout different regions, basically in the world. So they did market this with different bonus tracks. And when I think about this album, not only is this one of the band's best albums, but I think it's one of the most overlooked records from the band. It's kind of like, you don't hear people talking about this record, but then if you bring it up, everyone's like, oh yeah, I love that album. You have Pain in the World, you have the Bells of Seven Hells, and they start bringing up a lot of songs on the record. But in my opinion, everybody that wrote tracks on this album wrote some of the best music they've ever written. And again, it really made a lot of inroads to the United States with the tour that happened. Plus, the really cool thing about it is when they had the tour, Gamma Ray was the opener. They did an encore by bringing Helloween and Gamma Ray on stage. I'm going to flash some tour photos up a little bit later once I get to that. So let's talk about the album first. So the one thing I will say about this, aside from the record being very good, all of the bonus tracks that were recorded for this album are among some of the best bonus tracks recorded for any Helloween album. I just want to throw that out there. So let's start with it. So you have a track called Crack the Riddle. It's an intro. And you have Biff Bifford from Saxon. Actually, he's doing a narration on the actual intro of the album. And they actually did something really cool. One of the things they did to market this album is you had to solve the riddle. And if you could solve the riddle, I believe you could go and meet the band at some other continent somewhere. But instead of me telling you this, why don't I tell you what Andy Darris had to say about it in August of 2008 when talking about the Crack the Riddle and the whole purpose behind it and how Biff got involved. Check this out.
The intro of the album, called Crack the Riddle, had Biff Byford of Saxon doing the narration. And how did you hook up with him to do your narration to start the album off?
Oh, we know each other since years because we're playing the same festivals. Like every second summer, the bands are on summer festivals, and certainly you know the people. And I used to sing a song. It's called "I Need to Rock." I sang it together with Lemmy from Motorhead and Biff from Saxon, and Angry from Roaster 2. It's a great song. It's probably being out in October as a download thing, like a fan thing. It's like a heavy metal AC/DC song, if you ask me. I really like it.
You, Biff, and Lemmy singing a song together.
Yeah, it's very nice, very interesting.
It's got to be interesting.
Yeah, and I was kind of the greenhorn being asked to sing as well, because in comparison with those guys, they are icons, and I'm a newcomer icon.
Well, what was it like singing with Lemmy?
Yeah, it's cool.
He's got to be an interesting character.
Yeah. I mean, at least these are like very different voices, so you don't actually need to listen twice to recognize the people, you know?
Yeah.
Because the voices are so far away from each other. It's just great. But it's blending great. It's really cool. Yeah, and because of that, the idea was to ask Biff if he would have fun to record that spooky, playground announcer kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. It's cool. It's really cool, and it's called Crack the Riddle because it's the intro, which is important for the riddle inside the booklet. It's not very easy, but I think a metal fan can solve the riddle. It's like, you know, these rubber riddles where you have to rubber free something, and under it you find something, and which can help you to solve the riddle. And to solve the riddle, you also need that intro.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and we thought about like having prizes on each and every continent, which means if you, for example, in US would win the riddle, you can choose to come with us onto another continent, like for Japan or Europe, whatever you like. And that's the main prize for the fans out there. Every continent has a winner and can choose for himself, can choose a continent to travel with us.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think too.
And that's Andy Darris from August of 2008 talking about how the whole Crack the Riddle contest started and how Biff ended up getting involved. And, you know, I forgot about that track that he sang with Lemmy and Biff as well. So just a bunch of three legends singing on a song, which is cool. You get to the second track, The Saints, probably one of the best songs Michael Wycath has ever written. Definitely one of my favorites from him. As Long as I Fall was the single. It was a song written by Andy Darris. Weirdly enough, that track at first I wasn't that into, but then after the second chorus and into the break when it goes into the solo, you know, the more I listened to the track, the more I liked the song. But that was the single released off of the album. And of course there was a Japanese single as CD single as well for that. I don't know if there was one in Europe or anywhere else, but I know in Japan, because I have it, they released that single. Then you have a song called Paint a New World. Now, one of the things, number one, this is one of the most incredible Helloween songs I've ever heard. But number two, they used this song to promote the Hellish Rock tour with Helloween Gambling here in the United States, which was actually a very smart thing to do, because the style of power metal they play in that song is more along the lines of what people in the United States like to hear. And to hear more about that, this is Marcus Grauskopf from September of 2008 talking about why they picked the song Paint a New World to help market the upcoming Helloween tour, the Hellish Rock tour, here in the United States in fall of 2008. Check this out.
We got two new tracks in for the set in the States because we have a different single there. Mm-hmm. We did a little video clip for that, especially for the States. And yeah, we come over, we play, we see what happens. You're all invited to come and have some fun and share a beer with Helloween.
Now, what track did you release for the U.S. and what video clip did you do? And what new video clip did you do from the new album?
We did a clip for the song "Paint a New World."
Oh, very good song.
Yeah, because we talk to people and asking them what they, because the market is so different from what people do in Europe and what we do in Europe. So we're gonna ask people what they would like to have as a clip or as a single and stuff, and they pretty much decided that this song would be a nice track for America for like a single and for like a clip and stuff like this, you know. Mm-hmm. So why not doing it? We did a little clip in Spain, some live shootings, and you know, I like the song. I love it. Yeah, because we were asking a lot of people in America and record companies, because we don't know so much about what the people would like to hear over there, and so it's been recommended by all those people knowing the American market. And as it is a song we have on the album we all love so much anyway, we agreed, you know.
Yeah, it's my favorite song in the album. So, and yeah, good choice, good pick for a song, really good.
All right.
And that is, of course, Marcus Grauskopf, bassist Marcus Grauskopf from Helloween, talking about why the song Paint a New World was picked to help market the band here in the United States. So you have another song after that, Final Fortune, really cool song. I believe that's a Marcus Grauskopf composition, actually. Then you get into a trilogy of songs afterwards. The Bells of Seven Hells, a song called Fallen to Pieces, and another song called I Am Me. All three of them written by Andy Darris. All three of them, three of the best songs Andy Darris has ever written. And they have a really cool meaning behind the songs themselves. But The Bells of Seven Hells actually was a song I played on my radio show a lot. It just, for whatever reason, that song of those three resonated with me the most. And again, Andy Darris being a really, really good songwriter. And if you go back to the interview with Michael Kiske, he even kind of talks about that. I think the interview with Kiske's a couple years ago now, but he had talked about how Andy's a really good songwriter, which he is. And that trilogy of songs actually had a really, really cool meaning behind them. And to give you more perspective on that, again, here is an interview clip with myself and Andy Darris in August of 2008, where he talks about what this trilogy of songs actually means. Check out this clip.
Lyric-wise, as I already said, it's all about gambling with the devil. Mm-hmm. Little personal life things, gambling with the devil, up to the political big stage. Mm-hmm. Everything is in there. Well, there's a kind of trilogy of three songs, more or less, belonging together, which would be the Bells of the Seven Hells, fading into Fallen to Pieces, and that one fading into I Am Me.
Yeah.
These three more or less belong together because it shows like the typical history of your own life up to the, again, political stage. Whatever you want to put in, you can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. It's about that. The Bells of the Seven Hells, for example, is like the typical, if we take everyday's life, it's a typical thing that you don't know who you are. You just follow the one who shouts the loudest. That's like how all the wars started, or even your personal wars start and end up in a disaster. Which means you're not yourself. You're not having the guts to stand up for yourself. You rather take the easy way and follow the others, which is very, very dangerous, because if you look at my country's history, you know what can happen with that behavior.
Yeah.
So as a German, I know what I'm talking about. Then if something like this happens and you realize, like for example, the Second World War, later on, I think the people realized what they did by not showing civil courage, by not standing up and going against that system, but running with it like sheep, And if that happens and everything went down to hell, then your life would fade into the second song, which would be Fallen to Pieces. And Fallen to Pieces is something like that process where you have to find yourself. You have to realize that you have to be responsible for your life. And you have to pick up the pieces. You have to kind of rebuild yourself, rebuild the cities, rebuild the world in the most, in a not perfect world. And then that whole process would hopefully lead into the third song, which is I Am Me, that you actually have the guts to really stand there as a personality and shout yourself. If something goes wrong, you stand up and say, well, that's not the right way. Shut up, sit down, leave that guy alone. If we think about Subway, or if we think about who kind of attack people. And you've seen a lot of people standing around and just watching, but not acting. They are just they are just watching, as if they would watch a movie. But there is no courage to stand up and go against it. It's unbelievable. I've seen some of these documentaries, like in Germany or France or Spain or all over the world, where you can see people attacking others, and the surrounding just watches.
Yep.
It's unbelievable, but it happens day after day. It's unbelievable. And I Am Me, the last of this trilogy, is like, you are somebody, you stand up, you learned from your past, and you say, this will never happen again, because I am me, and I know what I'm standing for, and something like that. Yeah, you really stand up, you show courage, you know who you are. You don't need anybody to tell you where to go to, because you know exactly what's wrong, right?
All right.
And these are, as I say, in the whole gambling with the devil content, it's just it's for me a trilogy which stands for myself, actually, which stands for my last 20 or 30 years, where I learned to be myself, where I learned not to follow others simply or only because they're shouting louder than the others. I think this is very important in our life.
And that's Andy Darris talking about the trilogy of songs, The Bells of Seven Hells, Fallen to Pieces, and I Am Me. I love those three tracks, and those are three of my favorite songs on the album. And then you go down the album, you have a song called Can Do It, kind of a funny song, really cool. Michael Wyckoff wrote that. You have a song called Dreambound, which actually has one of the coolest guitar riffs in the opening of the song. It has a really cool guitar riff in the beginning of it. It's a great song. And then Heaven Tells No Lies, easily one of the best songs on the album. Overall, this is one of the heavier albums the band has ever put out. And it had a really great theme. It just, everything about it was really well done. I mean, it was almost pretty much like the band and the management flawlessly marketed this tour and this record. And here's how the album was actually marketed around the world. So if you notice, I have 4 versions of this album. Now, it was eventually reissued. This reissue is with all the bonus tracks. This actually, when I look at this, hold on. There it is. Nuclear Blast eventually reissued this. It's been reissued on vinyl too, a multitude of times. I own a couple versions of that on vinyl. The album was also originally pressed on vinyl via SPV, which was the record label they were on at the time. This, of course, is the Japanese version. You have the American version, which has some enhanced tracks. And then, of course, you have I'm looking at this right now. Yeah, this is the European version of it. So they had a different version for each major region. And what they did, and I want everybody to keep in mind that we were in the advent of social media, meaning that MySpace was about the only real social media platform that had, kind of gone mainstream that everybody was using. So you didn't have streaming. I mean, MySpace, actually, you could stream, I think it was like 4 songs on your website, but you didn't have streaming in the way that it's done today. And you didn't have Facebook, Twitter. I mean, these things were like in their infancy back then, because this is 2007, 2008, right before a lot of these other platforms really took off. So the only thing you had was illegal downloading. But what they did is they gave a different bonus track or a different set of bonus tracks to each region. So you had one for North America to basically promote the tour. You had one in Europe. You had the Japanese version of it. I'm sure they might have had different versions for other regions around the world, but that's what they had. So like the Japanese version had a song, I'm looking at it, We Unite, which is actually my favorite of the bonus tracks. This version that I'm looking at right now is the American one. So the American version was really cool because you had a song called Never Surrender. And then what they did is they just threw on 2 more B-sides from the Keeper Legacy album, Run, and then, of course, Revolution. And then you had the European version, which had, I'm looking at it right now, See the Night. And then, of course, you had Find My Freedom, which was a song that was also the B-side to the Japanese single, As Long as They Fall. So they did this to market the band in these different regions. Now, I don't know if this was an intended consequence or an unintended one, but when they did this, the talk on the internet, on the forums and the groups, were about the bonus tracks. In fact, there were people going out there and collecting every edition like I have here. Now, eventually, they have the newest version, the remaster, which has all the bonus tracks. But it generated a lot of talk online because people were trading versions, people were buying all the versions and talking about the songs, and it really generated a lot of talk. And it really helped promote this album. So let's get into the tour. The tour is interesting. It's a really, really fun story. This tour was really well promoted. And what they ended up doing was they ended up touring with Gamma Ray. Now, this is kind of a precursor. It's really not a reunion per se, but, this was kind of like the beginning of Pumpkins United, even though they didn't intend it to be because Pumpkins United wasn't even thought of back in these days. But what they did is Kai Hansen got back on stage with Helloween and the rest of Gamma Ray, and they did 2 songs at the end of each show. Future World and I Want Out. And I'm going to flash up some pictures here from a couple shows that they did and some of the fun that we had during that time. But that tour was phenomenal. It really, really was. Because to see Gamma Ray live opening for this band was great. But it was really cool watching Kai, Sasha, and Wyke play together on stage. People see the band now and they notice that this is something that, they see every night. Back then, aside from, a couple, back then, you saw Gamma Ray and Helloween get on stage together, and it was really kind of unheard of because they really hadn't done a tour like that. I don't think these bands even toured together. If I recall, look at my history, I don't think they have. So this tour was really cool. Not only was the set list great, but watching Andy and Kai sing these two songs on stage together was really a fun thing to watch. It really was. And you ended up getting to see two of the best power metal bands in existence. Now, I will tell you, in the United States, this generated a lot of talk about the band. So let me give you folks out, people that aren't living in the United States, people outside of the USA, let me give you a little bit of history about the band. So the reason this tour moved the needle a lot for them is, number one, Helloween had two major tours back in the 80s. They had the 1987 tour where they played with Grim Reaper and Armored Saint. It was a Headbangers Ball tour with MTV. They had another tour not long after that where they toured with Exodus and Anthrax. You know, two of my favorite thrash metal bands of all time touring with Helloween. That was another Headbangers Ball tour. And then what ended up happening is that the lawsuit with Noise pretty much was a big reason it prevented the band from coming over here and playing. So that tour in 1989 and 90 that they did, I think it was 1989, that they did in the United States, nobody saw Helloween play or even heard of them over here, aside from maybe my show and a few others like myself, until they played one show in New York about 9 years later in a small club called Coney Island High in Manhattan. And then they really didn't do any kind of touring until the Rabbit Don't Come Easy album came out in 2003. And even back then, the shows were kind of limited. So they really, for close to 20 years, really didn't have a lot of presence over here. So I remember this vividly. Back in 2008, and I mentioned this before, you didn't really have streaming, but what you did have at the radio station I was at, we streamed over the internet. And the stream over the internet, we actually had been doing it for quite a while, but it really became a bigger thing with high-speed internet. And we streamed over the internet. And that's when my show started to really gain a lot of listeners, a lot of people outside of the Cleveland area. And there were quite a few people, that were calling the show and listening to the show from different places in the world because it was streaming on the internet live. People would catch the show live. But after this tour happened, and while it was happening, the amount of people that would call me or message me or would email me saying, I never knew this band was still around. People that had gone and seen them in the late 80s. People who had never heard of them heard me playing a lot of that music that they had, a lot of the music that, they had put out over the years. And what ended up happening was a lot of the people that really hadn't heard much from the band really started to pay attention. Even if they didn't go to the shows back then, I had more emails and phone calls about Helloween during that year than I had pretty much, the 10 previous years combined. I think it was the 10th year of the show. So it really raised the awareness of the band over here. And that's what that tour did. And the way that the management promoted it was great. Now, were they selling out big rooms like they do in Europe or that they do in South America or Japan? No, because again, the band barely had a presence over here throughout a 20-year period. I mean, the Rabbit Don't Come Easy tour, they played shows here. Like that was their first actual real tour in the United States since 1989. So it had been 14 years. But they basically had to almost start from scratch when coming over here and playing in the USA. Now, are they playing, they're playing bigger rooms. I see more people at the shows. More people talk about them here now with the whole Pumpkins United thing. But it took some investment. It's taken some time. And the U.S. audience has slowly grown here. So that is the significance of this. And the other reason I brought this album up is that, a lot of, you had Gamma Ray and, we talk about Pumpkins United, right? With Kai and Kiske. Well, you had Kai going on stage with the band and the rest of Gamma Ray at the end of all of these shows during this tour. And that was a cool thing. It really was. And that was the first time people really saw that on a consistent basis. Now, as far as how the album was received by people, let's kind of go into that a little bit. And I'm going to end it off here. This album was received quite well when it came out. Reviews were fantastic, and people really loved this album. The two previous albums did get a lot of criticism in the press. So let me talk about Keeper Legacy really quick. And I'll touch on this more when I talk about that record. But Keeper Legacy ended up getting a lot of criticism, not because of the music, but because they talked about, they kind of referenced the two, biggest, most influential albums they had put out to date. They're talking about the legacy of the Keeper albums. And some people, of course, ended up getting offended by that. And even though the music on the album was great, the music was sort of overlooked by people that, regardless of how good or bad it was going to be, they weren't going to like it. That's truly what happened to that album. Rabbit Don't Come Easy, which I'm going to talk pretty in depth about that one. That album was very good. It did receive some positive press, but you did have a lineup change. Now, when you listen to the interview I did with Sasha Gerstner a couple years ago, we talk a little bit about the Rabbit Don't Come Easy and what it was like for him to come back into, come into the band for the first time. And we talked about Helloween taking risks with the Unarmed album. And of course, naming an album Keeper, the Seven Keys to Legacy. And that's one of the things that Helloween has done. And they've never been afraid to do. If you look at the songs they've written over the last 40 years. So this album was really well received. The promotion of this record was fantastic. The way they were really marketing this with the contest and with the different versions in each region. And on top of that, the songs were just good. And the tour, having Gamma Ray tour with Helloween, it's like a can't miss tour. So they did a really great job promoting this all the way around the world. Props off the bottom row for that. And the band really wrote an incredible album. There's some really good photography in there. I believe Sasha did a lot of that. Sasha's a tremendous photographer. One of the things that we talk about on occasion when I do see the guys. But this album's still one of my favorites. Is it top 5? Probably not, but just outside of that top 5 spot as far as my favorite albums from Helloween. So those are my thoughts on Gambling with the Devil. And I hope you enjoyed a trip back in time with some of the interview clips as well. So let's move on to the last subject here. Talk about Empires of Eden a little bit. I never really properly reviewed the album, mostly because I sang on it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about it because even though I didn't sing every track on it, I sang one song. If you take the song I sang off of the album, it's an incredible record regardless. So this album is it's out on Massacre Records, but you can also get it in Japan because in Japan it's getting a proper release and it's going to get a Japanese bonus track, which is a bonus track called Interstellar Sin, which is the song is phenomenal, first of all. And the singer on it is Vo Simpson, who is the singer for Stu's other band, Night Legion. So this record is coming out in Japan. I'm really excited. I don't think I've had anything released in Japan with me singing on it, first of all. So that's a first for myself. But I'm really liking the fact that this Empires of Eden project is finally getting more recognition. Now, this is the second album I sang on in regards to this project. And working with Stu has been a phenomenal thing. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with what Empires of Eden is, there is a podcast and a segment I did record on it, on the podcast. But if you don't want to go look for that, this is Stu Marshall talking about Empires of Eden on the latest interview that we did not long ago. Check out this clip. This is what Empires of Eden is all about. Let's move on to the Empires of Eden, Guardians of Time. So This album, obviously, probably, if I were to take, in my opinion, probably the best lineup collectively as far as singers go. For me personally, even if you took me out, I would think that. But, but a really, really great record, from the artwork to the production. I think the quality of the songwriting has been elevated quite a bit on this. And I finally, have able to actually like listen to it all the way through. Once I ended up getting the CD and a vinyl copy of this, but let's talk about this album. And you decided to start this project up. I was actually quite surprised when you said you were thinking about doing it again, because I thought it was a thing of the past, per se.
It was dead and buried. So, again, the short synopsis for everyone is Empires of Eden goes back to pretty much 2007. I'd finished in a band called Dungeon and left that band after a pretty big tour with Megadeth, and had all these songs written, but wanted to, really get them out there. And I don't sing. So the snapshot of this project is that I called it Empires of Eden, from the ethos that, everybody wants Eden as far as their world, and the dreaming of those kinds of empires is how we view the world, is the ethos behind it. But it just didn't feel right to have Stu Marshall on the cover, because I have singers writing their own lyrics, writing their own melodies, performing all their own stuff, and having almost zero input from me, which is cool for me. It's artistic. So through a range of smaller labels, released 4 albums. Some of those labels were wonderful people that tried their hardest, but the albums just didn't go the way of an Avantasia for a number of reasons. But we just didn't get the label support or any of the touring support. And my publicist at the time, back in 2016, said, "Look, this thing's run its course. You should probably think about that." And it hurts to hear that as an artist who's released 4 albums. But I sat with it and I went, you know what, you're probably right. So I left those as were, and on we went. Well, then I re-signed Night Legion with Massacre, Death Dealer with Massacre, and Thomas from Massacre said, "Look, would you like to re-release these Empires of Eden albums?" And I fell off my chair. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I love these albums. They're really passionate for me." And we got Udo Dirkschneider on there, we got Ralph Sheepers on there, we got Mike Vasera, we got Zach Stevens, like we got all these different singers. I'd love it to see the light of day. And he said, "Well, we really love them. Well, we'd like to do a new album, and we'll give you some money." And that was great. And that's what rejuvenated the Empires thing, is that we actually now had a party that was feeling the love of what these albums represented. Because what is unique about these albums, no one can ever take away the honesty. There's no dollar sign connected to these. So there's some pretty weird stuff on these albums, but it's what the singer wanted to represent. What you're hearing. Mike Vasera, so he sang with Malmsteen and Loudness. He said, "Look, this is the first time I've ever truly been allowed to just express myself properly, without." And so to hear a singer say that, for me, is incredible, because that's where the art's at, right? Like, you do your thing, Tony. I've never told you what to do or how to do it. I just present you a canvas that I've created with some colors, and you fill the rest in. And that's what is unique about this. So that's why it came back to life, because we had a party. We are re-releasing all 4 albums that have been fully remixed and remastered, that sound current and really powerful. I was never happy with the production. We never had the money, blah, blah, blah. So we're in a good space with it, and it's in good hands currently, even though I don't have the CD yet. I have the LP, but not the CD. So, but I'm real happy with the album, and I think it represents just a musical palette of everything I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it. I'm real happy with it.
Yeah. So I would tell you that, obviously, the better production, I think the artwork is probably, and the layout is probably the best out of any of those records, to say the least. I was blown away when I looked at the LP. I was like, man, this is crazy how good this looks. It doesn't really do it justice until you actually see it in person, and I was still blown away by the layout of this record.
But the other thing that not a lot of people know about is that I've remastered this for LP.
Yeah.
I remastered this for streaming, and we mastered it for CD. So each format has its own specially from scratch master. So this has been my pet peeve with LPs. They just take a CD and put it on an LP. We haven't done that. So you're going to hear something slightly different in the LP version, which I'm really proud of. And I think that's what we as artists have to start doing is, why should you buy the LP? Well, maybe it's going to sound nicer than a CD, you know, or depending on your setup. So yeah, that's an important thing.
I noticed that, and you know, the way that I run if I listen to vinyl, I mean, I have a 2 preamp going into the actual stereo coming from the turntable, and it really sounded really good when I put it on that system. Actually, to be honest with you, I have not listened to the CD. I've actually only listened to the LP, which is funny because I have this 2 preamp that just adds a lot of punch to listening to vinyl, and it sounds a million times better doing it that way. And I have yet to listen to the CD. It's kind of a funny thing. So, but I think it sounds good. And, you know, it was an interesting group of people that were on this thing. So David Reedman is somebody like a few of the people on here, like Louie's been on pretty much all of them. You know, Darren Smith, it's the first time he sang on one. David Reedman singing on it, which I thought was cool. I mean, Sean's been on it before. I've been on one before. Jonas Heiger. So you had some new people that you brought onto this record. I'm just curious what those specific people, what really made you want to bring them as part of this?
Everything starts off in the most innocent way of, let's talk Darren Smith. So I'm a huge Harem Scarum fan, like obsessive Harem Scarum fan. And Pete Lesperance is in my top 3 guitar players of all time. Criminally underrated, one of the best on the planet. And my favorite Harem Scarum song is a song called Saviors Never Cry, which is just absolutely ass-kicking. And, I just thought I'll reach out to Darren, see if he wants to sing on the album. You know, I had some great AOR songs I've written that some of them I sold to Frontiers. So Billy Sheen used some of my material on his album, his last album. And I had this fun song called When Will It End? And I couldn't hear anyone else but Darren singing it. And I reached out to him and he's like, yeah, let's do it. I fell off my chair. So it's really been around my self-indulgence. I'm a huge David Reedman fan, you know, the work that he did in Pink Cream and then also too the Silent Force stuff he did. Great singer, incredible vocalist, was available, and I had a great song for him. That's actually one of the reasons I have to mention. This is the first time on any of those albums I've got my name on the cover.
Yeah.
Because, I put Stu Marshall's Empires of Eden because I wrote lyrics and melodies to a couple of tracks off this album. The first one is Darren's song, When Will It End? I wrote that entirely, all the lyrics, all the melodies, and the same thing for David Reedman's song. So those 2 singers were kind enough to sing tunes that had been written for them. So the format of this album had a slight difference to it.
Yeah. I mean, you saw my podcast episode on it. I always thought you should have put your name on there just because you're bringing the whole thing together. You know, that's just my opinion. So
didn't feel right. Yeah.
Oh no, I gotcha. One of the things, and I look at reviews of these albums, I always feel that this project always gets misunderstood. Although I saw a lot less of that this time around. And what is it that you believe is the reason behind that?
Look, the first thing is I respect anybody in the industry that's got to sit there and listen to 5 CDs in a row and make a call. CD reviewers have a tough time. I think, firstly, CD reviewers are used to a single band doing a single album with the single singer. And whenever you do something like Empires, they're expecting it to be Operation Mindcrime. which is not unreasonable. A common thread that runs through the whole album with a theme and all that. And, the second last song speaks to the first song. And that's where I think it's not normal to have an album like I've done, where you've got 9 standalone songs by 9 different singers doing 9 different things.
Right.
And I think that's probably what needs to go out in the press release to reviewers is this is not that. This is not a concept album that speaks to stories or anything. It's when Rob Rock sings his song, he writes his song his way, and the next one after it has nothing to do with it. So it might confuse a few people. To be fair, on this album, I think we've hit a pretty wide spectrum of styles, right? Like I've gone from, hammer down, heavy metal, power metal opening to AOR to then, balls out thrash. So that might confuse a few people going, what the hell's this guy trying to do? And I get that too. So, but what's interesting with the reviews is some people really, really get it. And, we're getting some 9 and 10 out of 10s and stuff. And then there's a couple of people that just absolutely hate it because they just don't get it. And I respect it all. I don't make CDs for reviewers. I make CDs for people to turn on and want to enjoy their day with. And,
right.
If people dig it, great. Not everyone's going to dig it. But one thing I said before, you can't deny there's honesty in the music. And we don't do it for $. We do it because we're excited about heavy metal. And that's what this is for.
Yeah, I've seen probably the most positive reviews for this album, more so than the other records. And I thought that was actually really cool.
Yeah, and you know what? Everyone watching this, take 5 minutes, go to Spotify and listen to it for free. Check it out. And if you really like it, buy the LP. It's beautiful. It's worth it. It's a gorgeous insert. It's worth your money, and the CD is incredible too. A lot of effort and time's gone into it. And there's some cool merch and T-shirts you can get, and that's how we do it now. That's how, I want everyone to go and check it out for themselves, make your mind up whether you dig it. And if you do, then that's the way to support, but it's that's my cat.
I will tell you, and I'm not exaggerating. You did an excellent job mastering it to LP, to be honest with you. The sound on it was incredible. I almost now feel guilty not listening to the CD yet and then admitting that to you. But no, the LP, in all seriousness, the LP sounds absolutely amazing. And the really cool thing about it is, I have an EQ that's on the actual preamp itself. And I didn't have to adjust really anything. I mean, it just sounded great out the box. But you are right. There are people that do take just a straight digital copy and slap it on an LP. And most people don't realize you have to master it differently for a record as opposed to a CD or even streaming. So but I thought you did a tremendous job on the LP in all seriousness.
Yeah, thank you. That all came actually through pain because the very first Death Dealer album, Warmaster, was taken directly from CD and put on LP. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I played the LP here, I was horrified. I was like, what? Whoa, what's happening? And then I realized that it had been compressed even further by the LP process. So, we're in the process of fixing all that up too for the future with the new label. So,
yeah, the second Death Dealer though was mastered for vinyl. Because and I'll be honest with you, I have the first one on vinyl. I maybe listened to it once, but I don't remember listening to it again. But I remember when the second Death Dealer album came out, that actually, I was really amazed at how great that record sounded. It really sounded great, and it was mastered specifically for that. That is Stu Marshall talking about Empires of Eden, what it's all about, how the project started, etc., etc. So I think this album is great. It really, really is. Let's take away the song that I sang on for a minute. Even if it wasn't on there, the album is still fantastic. You have so many great singers. I'm looking at the track listing on the back of this. Rob Rock, the title track, is great. Darren Smith. You have a really crazy mix of music. Everything from AOR to power metal to hard rock to some thrashy elements. Immortal Rights has more of a thrash element to it. A lot of great stuff. The bonus track that's going to be on here is really awesome. And Vo Simpson's a really great singer. I actually can't wait for the next Night Legion album to come out. But I'm really excited that this album is going to be out in Japan. The cover art, the layout, Alex Yarbrough, phenomenal job. So I'm really proud of this. The song I wrote, Stand United, basically talking about the political divide and how crazy it is and how it needs to, how this whole divide, how people need to come together. It's really what the song's about. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that, but nevertheless, it's coming out in Japan, and I'm excited for that release. I think it's going to come out later this year. So it comes out on Rubicon Records. That's the name of the label in Japan. Really excited for this. So that's pretty much it. That's all I have for today here on the Metal Command podcast. Of course, if you like what you see in here on the show, hit the subscribe button. Hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you follow the show on any other form of social media, by all means, give the show a like and a follow there. Thanks for watching. Stay metal.